Robert Harrison stood in his corner office, watching the city lights flicker below. At 52, he'd built an empire in real estate development, but success had come with a price. His daughter Emma, now 23, had grown up with nannies while he worked endless hours. His late wife Sarah had been gone for 8 years now, taken too soon by cancer. These days, his penthouse felt more like a museum than a home. That's where Margaret came in. Margaret Sullivan was 48, with kind hazel eyes and auburn hair she wore in a practical bun. She'd been his housekeeper for 3 years, arriving each morning with a quiet efficiency that brought order to his chaotic life. She had a daughter in college and had been widowed young, working hard to give her child every opportunity. Robert noticed things about Margaret. The way she hummed old songs while folding laundry. How she always left a plate of cookies on the counter when Emma visited. The gentle way she'd remind him to eat lunch when he got lost in work. One evening, Robert found himself in an unexpected predicament. His business partner, James, had arranged a charity gala, a grand affair at the historic Grandview Ballroom. For months, James had been pushing Robert to attend, insisting it was time he rejoined society. "Bring someone," James had said with a knowing look. "You can't hide forever, Robert." The problem was simple. Robert had no one to bring. And worse, there was Victoria Ashford, a woman from his social circle who'd been pursuing him relentlessly. She saw him as a conquest, a wealthy widower to be claimed. The thought of spending an evening deflecting her advances exhausted him. That's when the idea came to him, sitting in his study while Margaret brought him evening tea, as she always did. "Margaret," he began carefully, "I have a rather unusual request." She looked up, her warm eyes curious but patient. That was Margaret's way, never rushing, always listening. He explained the situation slowly, choosing his words with care. The gala, Victoria's persistent attention, his need for a buffer just for one evening. "I know it's asking a lot," he said, "and I'd compensate you, of course, but I'd understand completely if you'd rather not." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, stirring her own cup of tea. She'd started joining him for evening tea 6 months ago, after he'd insisted. It had become their ritual, these quiet conversations at day's end. "It's been a long time since I've been to anything fancy," she said finally, a small smile playing at her lips. "My daughter's tuition is due next month. So yes, Mr. Harrison, I'll help you." "Robert," he corrected gently. "If we're to do this, you should call me Robert." The week before the gala, something shifted between them. Robert took Margaret shopping, insisting she needed a proper gown. He waited patiently while she tried on dresses, and when she emerged in an elegant emerald green dress with off-shoulder sleeves, his breath caught. She looked radiant, her auburn hair swept up, revealing the graceful line of her neck. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and meant it. Margaret blushed, touching the fabric self-consciously. "It's been so many years since I've worn anything like this." "Then it's overdue," Robert replied softly. The night of the gala arrived. The Grandview Ballroom was magnificent, all golden chandeliers and gleaming marble. As they entered together, Margaret's hand tucked into the crook of Robert's arm, he felt an unexpected sense of rightness. They moved through the evening with practiced ease. Robert introduced Margaret simply as Margaret Sullivan, a dear friend, which felt more honest than any pretense. She charmed everyone with her genuine warmth, asking thoughtful questions and listening with real interest to people's stories. Victoria appeared, stunning in a white designer gown, her expression cooling when she saw Margaret. "Robert, darling," she purred, "I didn't realize you were bringing someone." "Victoria," Robert replied evenly, his hand moving to rest gently on Margaret's back. "May I introduce Margaret Sullivan?" The two women exchanged polite greetings, but Victoria's gaze was calculating. Margaret, for her part, remained gracious but stood a little straighter, her chin lifting slightly. When the music began, Robert turned to Margaret. "May I have this dance?" On the dance floor, surrounded by other couples, something unexpected happened. As they swayed together under the soft lights, Robert found himself genuinely enjoying the moment. Margaret fit perfectly in his arms. She smelled of lavender and vanilla, familiar and comforting. "You know," Margaret said softly, "I haven't danced since my husband's funeral. We danced at the wake, my daughter and I. It was his favorite song." Robert's arms tightened around her slightly. "I haven't danced since Sarah," he admitted. "This is nice, just nice." They didn't need to say more. The music played, and they simply were, two people who'd known loss learning to be present in a gentle moment. Throughout the evening, Robert watched Margaret. Really watched her. The way she laughed at old Mr. Peterson's stories, her face lighting up with genuine delight. How she complimented Mrs. Chen on her grandchildren, asking their names and remembering details. She moved through the room like a warm breeze, leaving people smiling in her wake. This was who Margaret was every day in his home, he realized. He'd just never been still enough to truly see it. As the evening wound down, Victoria made one final approach. "Robert, we should have lunch next week. Catch up properly." Before he could respond, Margaret spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm afraid Robert's schedule is quite full these days. But thank you for thinking of him." Victoria's smile tightened, but she nodded and moved away. Once she was gone, Robert looked at Margaret with newfound respect. "Thank you." "She's not right for you," Margaret said simply. "You need someone who sees you, not just what you've built." The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to examine. In the car ride home, they were both quiet. Not an awkward silence, but a comfortable one, the kind that comes from being at ease with someone. "Margaret," Robert said as they pulled up to his building, "would you join me for dinner tomorrow? Not as my housekeeper, just as you." She turned to him, those hazel eyes searching his face. "I'd like that, Robert. I'd like that very much." The next evening, Robert cooked, or attempted to, a simple pasta dinner in his vast kitchen. Margaret laughed at his fumbling attempts, eventually joining him to help. They worked side by side, chopping vegetables and stirring sauce, talking about everything and nothing. They spoke of their children, their lost spouses, their dreams that had been set aside. Margaret told him about her love of gardening, how she missed having a yard. Robert confessed that he'd once wanted to be an architect, to create beautiful spaces for families, before business had taken over. "It's not too late," Margaret said softly, "to remember who you wanted to be." Over the following weeks, something beautiful and unexpected bloomed between them. Robert found himself looking forward to coming home, to Margaret's presence. Not because she kept his house running, but because she made it feel like a home. Emma noticed the change immediately when she visited. "Dad," she said, watching how her father and Margaret moved around each other in the kitchen. "You're smiling again." "Really smiling?" Robert looked at his daughter, this young woman he was so proud of, and nodded. "Yes," he said, "I suppose I am." One evening, as they sat in his study sharing tea as had become their custom, Robert reached across and took Margaret's hand. Her fingers intertwined with his, a perfect fit. "Margaret," he said, "I asked you to pretend for one evening, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being pretense for me. You've reminded me that life isn't over at 52, that it's okay to want companionship, to want warmth, to want love again." Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You've given me the same gift, Robert. You see me, not just the uniform I wear or the work I do. You see Margaret." They sat together in the soft lamplight. Two people who'd thought their stories were written, discovering that the best chapters might still be ahead. Life, they both understood now, had a funny way of bringing people together when they stopped looking. Sometimes the person you needed was already there, had been there all along, just waiting for you to see them with your heart instead of your eyes. And in that moment, holding hands in comfortable silence, they both knew this was just the beginning.